Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Well, that was less than ideal. Hello to you, Nest family. It was a struggle on Saturday. Drew Jones, hello to you. Welcome to another edition of the program. It's bemusing that we're talking in these circumstances. We're in cruise control at halftime against the Saints, and that is the most bizarre Eagles game that I can remember. I can't recall a time in recent times where we've had such a massive contrast between a first half and a second half, and such a massive contrast in a result that was seemingly coming at halftime.
Seems like that might have been the worst 45 minutes of football that we've played in a very, very long time. Yep. Garby, hello to you. I wish it was under better circumstances that we meet today. It felt like an absolute kick in the guts. And seriously, that was hard to watch. I mean, the Western Bulldogs fans, when they came late, made life pretty difficult for me. And the St Kilda fans, I felt, were a little better natured, but it was really hard to be there and watch that capitulation from the boys. Of course, I probably went too early with my call last week that we wouldn't be any lower on the ladder than when we were after the win against Port, but we were all sipping the Kool-Aid after a sensational performance against Port Adelaide. Unfortunately, it looked like for 2.5 quarters that we were on our way to producing another really professional performance against a team that, let's face it, needed to respond. The Saints had been absolutely putrid for the previous fortnight. They responded, and they responded really well. So I just want to pose a question to you, Garby, off the very top, because as you've always said, there's no fear or favour on the Nest when it comes to assessing West Coast.
Yeah. Did
we lose the game at the selection table when we did not replace Luke Shuey with an actual midfielder?
Quite possibly, yeah. I mean, I was surprised Jake Waterman played. Like, completely. Regardless of the midfielder selection, even if he was replacing another forward, I was surprised he played. He didn't have a preseason. Yes, he's a very talented player, but he was so rusty early. And he had to play down back because of the Hearn injury. And I just didn't see why he came straight in. I just didn't understand the selection there. I thought he had to work his way into some better form, having missed the preseason. And a midfield replacement for Shuey, to me, made complete sense. It doesn't excuse the players who are actually there, because their performance in the second half, the midfielders, was insipid. It was utterly insipid. Like, yeah, you said the Saints had to respond. That's true. But they didn't in the first half, or we just played a lot better than them. And then it came later that their pressure and that was excellent. But our boys just didn't fire back at all. And another midfielder in there, to answer your question, would have certainly helped. I think we made a mistake there. I don't think we lost the game at the selection table, to be more accurate with the answer. But I think it was a mistake to bring Waterman straight in as opposed to someone like Xavier O'Neill.
I didn't absolutely hate Waterman's game. And in fact, I think he's very much in our best 18. But it was a question of context and circumstances. So it became even more apparent after the fact when we learnt that Dom Sheed wasn't well, and they flew over Xavier O'Neill as cover later to Melbourne because there was a chance that Sheed wasn't going to play. So not only were we missing Yo and Shuey, we also had Dom Sheed not feeling well, who's been one of our prime movers to start the season.
And Andrew Gaff, going back to the Andrew Gaff of weeks 1 and 2.
Yeah, so it did not work for us. I thought Tim Kelly tried hard, but he was good. It was okay in the first 2.5 quarters, and then unfortunately, he wasn't able to affect the game at all once the Saints got a run on. But the fumbles and the mistakes and the ball movement just became so disjointed and just frankly awful in the last 45 minutes.
We couldn't win the ball.
Yeah.
Like, we couldn't get the ball in our hands in the midfield. Like, okay, Kelly, he gets beaten by his opponent. They put the clamps on him, and that's tough. I thought Redden worked hard. He just doesn't have the tricks that some of the others do, but he kept going. Okay, Sheed, you say he wasn't feeling well. Fair enough. But, he was playing really well in the first half and then just stopped. So maybe he fatigued for that reason. I mean, Duggan gets a bit of an injury, so that doesn't help. He tried to power through, but he was clearly inhibited. And obviously we lose Hearn. But sometimes our midfields, we get a bit of a reputation for being downhill skiers, and that's not fair because our record at Melbourne's really good. But sometimes when the going gets tough, they can go into their shells a little bit. There are times when they work through it, like the St Kilda game end of last season, like the Doggies game. But there are other times when the opposition brings the pressure or puts the tag on, and they don't bust through it enough. And as a group, they did not bust through it enough in that second half, and they just allowed themselves to be steamrolled.
Oh, you cannot tell me that happens if you've got Luke Shuey cracking in, leading from the front. There's times where he puts us on his shoulders around stoppage and he almost fights a lone battle. That Adelaide win we had away from home a couple of years ago where Oscar Allen kicks that really great goal late. That was the prototype Shuey performance where everyone else isn't quite up to the level and we're up against it in the game, but Shuey just holds us in it, winning clearances, laying tackles, being tough around the ball. We missed that so badly with him not in the side. And Elliot Yeo is the definition of a bull inside there. So the -2, we talked about it so much, but that does start to hurt, especially when we're not pulling our weight elsewhere. So let's look back at the Western Bulldogs game, for example. We played a hell of a lot better as an overall package against the Dogs than we did on Saturday. And the Dogs have a much better midfield than the Saints do. So we played up to the level on that day and we were maybe 1 or 2 short. On Saturday against the Saints, we were 1 or 2 short and we didn't play well enough in the midfield. So, yeah, really disappointing. It's such an opportunity lost. To think that we were 2.5 goals up against the Dogs and 33 points up against St Kilda away from home. Conceivably, we could be 4-0, maybe 3-1. It's a really wasted opportunity.
Yeah. The Saints are a good team, though. So let's put that caveat in. Like 3 weeks ago, they were being spoken about as a top 6 side. So when they're up and going and they've got their pressure going and their zip, they're a very difficult side to play against, especially at Marvel. So it's not as if we blew it against a weak team and allowed them to run over us. They are a good side at their best, but we had that game there for the taking. And the frustrating thing is our players just didn't respond when they were challenged. They went to water a bit. And Gaffey looks like there's something up once more. I mean, it's crazy to say that after the way he played against Port, which is really good. But again, it was another one of those weeks where he looked like he was running in quicksand. And you start to ask questions, is there something wrong?
Yeah, it was noticeable, the fact that I wasn't noticing him during the game at any stage. So it's something he has to work through. I hope the Port game wasn't the exception and not the rule. So hopefully he can get his game back to where it needs to be. But we've been a bit doom and gloom. There are positives to come out of this game. And if we beat Collingwood on Friday night, then that does leave us at 3-2, which I think we said at the start of the season, 3-2 was a good result from the first 5 games. We'll get to the Pies in a sec. Just as where it comes to positives from the weekends, Jack Petruccelli, take a bow. He was absolutely sensational in the first half.
Yeah. Well, I've been calling for him to do it when it matters. It's all well and good that an outside player with pace who finds the goals can kick 3 on a Sunday Arvo when we're up by 7 goals, but do it away from home in the first quarter when the game's there to be won. And he did. He was fantastic. I mean, he's just such an asset to the team when he's running around like that. Okay, he's not going to have games like that every week, but when he's playing with that sort of enthusiasm and energy and snaring a couple, what a player to have. So he was fantastic. It's clear that Simo is trying to get more pace into the team. It's obvious. Like Petruccelli, Jermaine Jones, who should have been in, but, he brings him in. And then, they fast-track Isaiah Winder. Like, yes, he was the medical sub. They probably thought he's unlikely to play. But, you bring him in a bit earlier than people expected. I know he had a good game in the Waffle the week before, but it's his first season. I think with the new rules, there's a clear push to get a bit more pace in the team from the coaching staff.
Yeah, and I reckon if they even had their time again during the recruiting period, they would have even gone another level and made speed even more of a priority. Probably a little too soon for Winder, but geez, it was great to see him get that first goal and a moment to savour. I'm sure they didn't anticipate that he would be required to do as much work as he was. It is interesting though that they, even with the situation with Shee, they still obviously decided that they were happy for Winder to make his debut and be a part of the squad, even though O'Neill was then available to them, having brought him over. I guess they didn't initially select him in the squad, did they? So clearly he wasn't in their thinking to being a starting 22 or the 23rd man. But just on Shannon Hearn, pretty disappointing thing to happen when you're equaling the record for the amount of games played for the club. The calf, which Simo said isn't probably a super serious one, but likely to keep him out for a couple of weeks. And it hurt us losing Shannon Hearn for sure.
And that early in the game, and it would have been such a nice build-up to a Friday night game against the Pies to have Shannon Hearn breaking the record, just the perfect build-up to that and the perfect storyline. So that has to be put on ice in more ways than one, unfortunately, and presents an opportunity for Alex Witherden now. I mean, he surely comes in. I know Simo's mentioned Luke Foley, but it has to be Witherden. I mean, you've recruited the guy. You play him. Pure and simple. Why would you recruit him if you're not playing him in this situation to be your halfback quarterback, if you like, and take over from Shannon Hearn for the kickouts and so on and so forth. So I've got to throw him into this game. That's exciting for us at least. We'll go into some of the other changes a bit later on, but yeah, massive shame that we'll be losing Shagger Hearn in this one. It has certainly affected the team. So let's get into the votes then, because that helps us sum up some of the other positives to go with Petruccelli, who we have mentioned, Drewy. I'll start with one of the other positives as well with my one vote. I'll go from 1 to 5 to get him in. Sorry, he's my 2 votes. In fact, I gave 1 to Jack Darling just because I had 4 players down. And I'm like, Jack Darling's done really well and hasn't had a vote this season. I thought he was good early. So I gave him the 1 just to say, yep. And if you like, acknowledgement for a solid start to the campaign. And I thought he was pretty good throughout the game. Jared Brander the 2. So that was the other positive, right?
Yeah.
Flowing on from his game against Port, he was excellent. I mean, he had, I think, 4 inside 50s early on. He had 4 intercept marks. He was doing it at both ends, and that's the Jared Brander prototype player that we've recruited. So that was another big positive. 3 to Tommy Barrass, who held down the fort down back. 4 to Nick Natanui, who tried to get the midfield going, but just didn't have anyone getting around his feet. And then 5 to Petruccelli, who's pretty obvious for the best on for the Eagles. Who was your 5 to 1?
So just on Brander, who I gave 2 to as well, it was getting to a point on Saturday during the first half, or up until the point where we started sucking, that I was excited when he was going near the ball. So now I'm really relishing seeing him in the side. I know it's early days, but just seeing what he's capable of. I want to see more of Jared Brander. Having moved away from Perth, I haven't been able to watch him in the waffle as much. So just getting to know him as a player has been a real pleasure. And he's been, in his first 10 games, to be fair to say, he was fairly lackluster playing for the Eagles, but the last 2 have been really encouraging. So if he's taking the next step, that's a massive tick for us. And he's showed his versatility. He was forced to play on the wing a little bit more, as Simo outlined post-game. And that's important because previously he struggled in that role. I gave a vote to Oscar Allen. I thought, despite the fact that he was coming in with the niggle with his shoulder, he battled really manfully in the ruck. And just every time he's around the ball, things seemed to happen for us. So he was really positive for us, particularly when we were playing well. I thought Brad Shepherd was really solid down back. I couldn't give Tom Barrass any votes after that disgusting kick in the back line, which cost us dearly, and a real momentum sapper. So Barrass is having a great season, but that was a really bad moment for him. Bit of a hark back to when he had his shakes and wobbles towards the end of 2019. Jeremy McGovern, I thought his aerial work for us was really important. His defensive work was really good early. And then, Petruccelli clearly gets the 5. He was our best player. And that goal that he kicks, the check side, running on his left foot away from the goals to, the build-up play to that was really good. And then the finish was fantastic. That's, that for mine, that's one of the best Eagles goals, you'll see all season. So, a few positives there, a lot to work on.
Petch got full votes from everyone except one person. So he absolutely dominated the Ness medal votes for this round. So Petruccelli had 48. We had 3 players tied on 19. That was Shep, Gov, and Barrass. Shep had the most 5 votes, though, so he gets the 4. In fact, he only got the 1 5 vote because everyone else gave Petruccelli 5. So the person who gave Petch 3 gave Shep 5. So Shep with the most 5s gets the 4 votes, if that makes sense. Now, Gov had more 4 votes than Barrass, so he gets the 3. Barras gets the 2 and Nick the 1. So the votes for this week, Petruccelli 5, Shepherd 4, McGovern 3, Barras 2, Nick Natanui the 1 for the loss to St Kilda. And that takes our top 3 in the Nest medal. Tommy Barras out on top now on 9 votes. Nick Natanui has 8 and Tim Kelly 7. So Tommy Barras, after the first month of the season, is leading the Nest medal, which is a bit of a surprise, I would say, Drewy, going into the first month of the season from what we would have expected.
Yeah, I mean, not a surprise because he's an absolute jet, but probably because I guess you expect others to be higher vote getters. But it probably shows the aptitude and the footy knowledge of the listeners and people involved with the Nest, that we're looking for more than just stats on a page and goals kicked. We're looking for influential players that operate within our system and are important to our game plan. And Tom Barras is one of those.
Exactly right. So, yep, good to see him up there, and Nick and Kelly doing well as well. So thank you very much for your votes, everyone. We'll give you a lengthy leaderboard next week, hopefully after a win over Collingwood. It's revenge time. I don't care what people say. It's not about revenge. Simo will say it this week, and the others will say it this week. It's not about revenge. We haven't thought about the final. Bullshit. We want to get them back for what happened in that final last year. We want to get one over the Pies. Friday night, blockbuster game, the nation watching. We've got to get back on track. They're on the ropes. They're reeling. They'll try and come to Perth again, Drewy, with a bit of that, siege mentality type feeling around Nathan Buckley, who's under pressure. They're 1 and 3. I don't think it'll work this time, and we can't allow it to work. We need to sting them early on, like they've done to us in the last couple of big games in Perth, and then just smash them like we did in the middle of the season last year.
If Mason Cox starts catching balls in the first quarter again and putting us to the sword, I will seriously lose it. I don't want to see that bloke get anywhere near the football. He can't just play well once every 2 years and put teams away like that. It's bloody frustrating. So, Tommy Barras, you're leading the Nest vote count for the season. It's time to step up and shut Mason Cox down. I don't want to see him having any effect on the game. And that's one of the only reasons that they won that game was the ridiculous pulled out of their ass goals they were kicking. That one from De Goey from the boundary was an absolute corker. But the Myercheck accidentally kicked a goal with his left foot. Mason Cox catching a couple early. Take those out of the game and we're home and dry. So, yeah, I'm getting a bit sick of this backs to the wall Collingwood mantra where they go over to Perth and they win on emotion. Like, we're a better football team than Collingwood, and we should be beating them almost every time we play them. So let's not let this backs to the wall, woe is me against the world attitude be enough to beat us. Collingwood aren't good enough on their day, all things being equal, to actually beat us. So let's not let that happen this week. So the emotion of the occasion is important for them, but it should be really important for us as well, because we're coming off a really diabolical last quarter and a half against St Kilda. We need to respond. We need to be 3-2. Let's end Collingwood's season. If they're 1 and 4, they're done. And they're a club on the way down. They had to trade out some of their best players because they had too much stowed away in the salary cap and gave Grundy $3 million too many over 7. So, yeah, let's put them away. And I think, we've got the cattle to do it. Midfielders clearly have to lift. If Levi Greenwood gets picked to tag Tim Kelly, let's get into him. Let's not let this happen again. The mistakes of the past need to be eradicated.
Yeah, agree with that. And if he does go to Kelly and put the clamps on, as I said at the end of the final and the debrief of that game, I know we've got midfield issues in terms of personnel, but send Tim Kelly to half forward. Levi Greenwood can't go with him in open space. He can go with him in a contest. If Kelly's got 3 meters of open space to run on Greenwood, he's a meter ahead of him straight away. So break it up like that and then make the Pies go, all right, well, what do we do now? Because Greenwood's just not going to be able to match him for pace and Kelly's going to do some damage. I'd like to see Tim freed up a little bit more sometimes when that happens. I know it's very difficult at the moment because we don't have the personnel in there, but I'm going to go through my changes that I want for the week and hopefully that allows for that to happen. So I'm calling for 3 changes, Drewy. So Witherden in for Hearn, O'Neill in, and Langdon back in. And then obviously Hearn goes out. I think Waterman goes out. And then Winder gets removed from medical sub and Jones becomes the medical sub and Langdon comes in for him.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me to see Jermaine Jones go out of the team.
And I like Jermaine Jones.
Yeah,
I'm a big fan of his, but I just think we need to
Yeah.
make some changes. We need to do something.
Yeah, and I like Langdon's toughness. So I'm all for having someone of his ilk in the team. I'm a big believer, and maybe I'm old school or maybe I'm too much of an ice hockey fan, but I think you've got to match the other team's grunt players. Like, you can't allow Collingwood to pick a couple of blokes who are going to be physical and try and intimidate West Coast opponents or do jobs like Greenwood will do. You can't just let that happen. You need someone in there who's going to be the roughhouser for us. So, if Greenwood plays and he's shutting down Kelly and doing a job, I want to see Langdon go over there and bang into Greenwood over and over and put blocks on and help Kelly out. I don't want to just see, that old thing where they say, after the game, Kelly's got to work through that, and, him being tagged frees up someone else. That's crap. I don't want to hear that. I want to see blokes flying the flag, helping out their teammates. So if Langdon can come in and be that aggressor and give us really honest forward play, I think that's a good thing for us. Witherden just has to play, and I'm excited to see what he can bring. Let's use his skills. Let's give him the ball whenever we can, because he's a great user, and that's why we brought him to the club. But we want him to be a West Coast player for the rest of his career. We want to make him feel at home. He's a country boy from Victoria. Let's get him in the side. Let's get him assimilated with the West Coast way. And then, we need to do something in the midfield. So you think O'Neill, absolutely the best option to replace what we've lost?
Yeah, I do. Bubba Ainsworth had a good game in the waffle, apparently. So I think he might be in the mix. He might be a sneaky option, but O'Neill's done nothing wrong. I really like him. I think he uses it well. I think he moves well and he's tough. So I think he's got to come in for this one to give us a chop out in midfield. I'd bring him in for Waterman. I think we can be a little bit too tall at times. I don't think we need to be that tall against the Pies. So Neil for Waterman, Witherden for Hearn, and then Langdon for Winder, basically. And then Jones goes down to medical sub. So that would be the way that I would play it this week. Not sure what other changes you would make. Do you agree with the Waterman axing?
I do like Waterman, but
I like him as well. I just don't think he's ready at the moment.
Something's got to give in order to address the imbalance in terms of height. Like, can Brander and Waterman both be in the team, both playing essentially as midfielders? Like, I'm not sure that quite works. The balance maybe isn't right. I think Craig O'Donoghue said in the press conference after the game that there were 9 players over 190 centimetres. So you're starting to just go a little too top heavy. It's a night game. What if it rains? There's a lot of things to take into account. I think an extra runner or two wouldn't be a bad thing.
Yeah. So we agree on that one, mate. Hopefully we can get things right in this one. Great opportunity. And look, we're playing pretty well. We had a horrible half, a stinking half. But outside of that, we haven't had a bad half all season. So hopefully we can put it all together and put the Pies to the sword and, put ourselves in a pretty strong position. It's a great opportunity for us to do so. I think we will, but we've got to make some changes and we've got to reinforce the midfield. You posed a question to our Nest listeners, Drewy, about trades. Again, it's probably an American sport fascination that you have, which is fair enough, mid-season trades and so on. So why don't you bring that to us and some of the responses?
It has created a little bit of buzz off the back of it. Now, a couple of I'll just address this at the start. A couple of the listeners and the people who have responded have sort of said that maybe we're piling on and, by suggesting that players should be traded out of West Coast. That's certainly not at all what we're thinking. If anything, Garby, really the thought was, like, who would we want to try and get? Who could help us right now or for the next 5 weeks, whatever. More than anything, it's a positive. And it's also completely make-believe because there is no trade period or loan system that we can use. But the one that got me thinking about it today in particular, Garby, and I'll get you to respond while I then set up the rest of the responses, is we need a midfielder for like the next few weeks, maybe someone with a bit bigger body or a bit more established. And I was just trying to think about guys around the league who aren't getting a game. And the one that just pops into my head was Braden Fiorini, who plays for the Gold Coast Suns, he was one of their best players probably 2.5 years ago, and he can't get a game now. I was like, could we just stick Braden Fiorini into our midfield for the next 4 to 5 weeks, give him a chance to establish himself again as an AFL player, knowing that we've got Shuey and Yoda come back. We don't have to rush them back. But also, Fiorini could still stay in the side potentially when they come back. Or if nothing else, he provides a great depth option for us. The Suns have given up on him, it seems like. So why not bring him to the club? And then I was thinking in the back of my mind, well, could we loan them Nathan Vardy for a few weeks before Zach Smith comes back from injury, just to sweeten the deal and give him a third rounder or something? It was just, that was just what I was thinking. Yeah. But it would be great to be able to plug in an established AFL midfielder just for a little while we get our bearings back with our injuries. Have you got any ideas on who you'd want to chase?
Luke Dunstan from St Kilda. So he'd be the perfect kind of player as well, who did pretty well last season but didn't play much. He's around the mark, I think, for the Saints this week, I understand. So someone like Luke Dunstan, just someone to give a bit of grunt in there, a bit of in and under, and then get it out to Sheed and Kelly. So someone like that, just to give us a chop out in that regard while Yo and Shuey are out. By the way, some positive news on Elliot Yo that Simo came out with the other night, saying he's basically started his pre-season now, a mini pre-season, and they're looking at the mid part of the campaign. So in 4 to 6 weeks to bring him straight back in. So that's positive. That's positive that he's had a little step up, you would think. The worry is that he's going to have a little step back again soon, because that's been the tale for him over the last 2-3 months. But he sounded a bit more encouraged, Adam Simpson, about where Elliot Yo is going. So we could be halfway mark back with him in the team and Luke Shuey. We just got to hold until then. And if we beat Collingwood, well, then it opens up a little bit for us on paper. It's the Dockers next week. We can beat them. And then we've got some easier games. So massive game on Friday night. If we can just get to a couple of games ahead by the time Shuey and Yo are back, well, then we're set.
Yeah, see, this is why I would just love to be able to just chuck away a third-round pick and get Fiorini just until then. Like, just give us a bit of extra support, play a role for us, and maybe we end up with a really good player out of it. Anyway, so a couple, Candice, of course, we always expect to hear from her. She's throwing out the one we've spoken about before, which is the Brander for Jordan Clark deal. I'm pretty tempted to say that Brander is now a very much a required player now that we've seen what he can produce. And Jordan Clark actually hasn't been that great for Geelong this season, apart from that really great goal he kicked a couple of weeks ago. And then the one that she's throwing out there is Shai Bolton. So the reason for this is that Bolton is coming out of contract at Richmond. Of course, he's a WA boy. So I think the idea being that instead of Richmond letting his contract run down, they would trade him now and sort of cash in, and don't risk losing him for nothing. But it would take a lot to get Shai Bolton, no matter when it is, over to West Coast, because he is a really talented player and the Tigers rate him really highly. A speculative one from Steve saying McGovern for Bont. Not sure that's going to happen. Marcus about to play his 150 game and the latter leading Western Bulldogs.
Much as we love the Gov, that is, pipe dream and a half, unfortunately.
Let's see what else we've got here. I'm just scrolling. Nat Fyfe thrown in there, of course. We'd love to have Nat at the club. I don't think that's going to happen.
Someone said Braden Ainsworth for Nat Fyfe, which is, if we chuck in the sweetener of a draft pick, it might happen.
Nat Fyfe 0-6 on the weekend, so stock clearly on the way down for Nat Fyfe. Still scrolling here. No, this is one I liked. This is a good suggestion and exactly what we're looking for. Quinton Narkle, who I thought we should have looked at over the summer. He's just played his first game of the season with some horrible-looking bleached hair for Geelong against Melbourne on Sunday. But he's not a lock in their best 22, not by any stretch. So Narkle would be one that could really fill a role for us. I think he is a promising midfielder. Probably needs to work on his tank a little bit, but he would be one you could sort of throw out a future second rounder or something and get Narkle into the club. Would you like to see him at West Coast?
Yeah, he'd be a good option. I think he's the kind of player that we looked at the end of last season. We wanted Jordan Clark, and then I think Narkle was another one we looked at, but it didn't quite come to fruition. And in the end, Witherden came through, and that was fine. But there's no doubt that Narkle is a player who should be on our radar because he's going to struggle to break into the Cats team. I'm not sure he's the in and under player we need, but he's another to roll through there. So he'd be in our team right now, Narkle. No doubt about it, because we're just so short in there. So he's a good one, and they should monitor him. And he looked reasonably sharp against Melbourne on the weekend. So, Narkle's without a doubt one of those players.
Stephen Goff has said Tim English has got to be on our radar. He's probably almost playing a little bit too well right now. we probably could have, if we really wanted him badly, it could have been a couple of years ago. But now with Steph Martin and him playing forward, he looks sensational for the Dogs. Here's an interesting one. Neil Stewart has suggested we chase Stephen Cornelio. Now, a man that you know quite well, I think, Garby. He suggested Waterman and a pick for Cogs. Waterman certainly would slot in very nicely for the Giants, as much as I would probably like to keep him, and he's just signed a new contract with us. But Cogs at West Coast is interesting, isn't it? I mean, he's obviously such a big part of what GWS have built, but I guess the external view is that maybe things have sort of soured a little bit for him at the Giants. I mean,
yeah, when you watched the doco, I don't know what you thought about it. I felt as if, and I know Stephen Cornelio, but I'm hardly good mates with him. It's not as if we discuss this stuff. So I'm not speaking out of turn here. I'm giving my opinion. It seemed as if there was a little bit of tension between him and Leon Cameron.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you picked that up at all. Yeah. So and just really, like, it seems as if maybe it happened over the captaincy thing. We know that was a slight point of conjecture at GWS. I mean, that maybe play a part. Do they feel as if the captaincy was given to him without the coach's blessing necessarily? It seemed like Leon Cameron was picking on him at times, to be honest, always bullying Stephen Cornelio, who had to lift his form, of course. I'm sure he'd hold his hand up in that regard. But, geez, the coach didn't seem to warm to him much. So, I don't know. Maybe there will be and considering they won so well without him on the weekend, maybe there will be a parting of the ways at season's end. Who knows? And then no doubt the Eagles would be an option. But, yeah, I mean, I can't see it happening because he's tied down there. He's still a much-loved player. He's on a very big contract. It'd be hard to do. But if they keep improving and winning while he's out, and maybe there will be a separation potentially.
God, he just looked like a man who needed a fresh start. That's what it looked like to me. But that's the problem with the documentary, though, is obviously the Giants had a tough year. There were probably plenty of happy times for Cogs during the season. We just didn't see it because it's not great television. But he would be a good fit at West Coast, no doubt about that, if we could find the money for him and he gets to come home and be closer to family, which I'm sure would be a big tick. And, you know, GWS have got their issues in terms of they're just about to sign Josh Kelly on an 8-year contract at $1 million a year. So if they could move some money out of their midfield, I don't think it would be such a bad thing. And I'm sure they're thinking right now that Toby Green looks like he suits the captaincy absolutely down to the ground. So Cogs would be an interesting one. The last one thrown at us was Mitch Duncan. I think he's probably a little bit too valuable to the Cats at this stage, particularly as they push for a premiership. But the thought of Mitch Duncan coming home has always been appealing. I think maybe it's just too far gone now for Duncan to eventually return to the Eagles or the Dockers.
And a nice one from Frank to finish off. Shuey and Yo are the two trades we need. We'll be fine when they come back. And maybe we will be, but it would be nice in a fanciful kind of way to think about who we could get in the short term. But that's not the way the AFL works. But it was nice to pose that question and have that interaction with the Nest listeners and viewers. That's what it's all about, Drewy. So that wraps it up for this week, I think. Bring on the Pies. What a massive game it is. And I just love to blitz them. We've done it before. I mean, I think they might come a little bit downcast. I think it's going to be hard for them to rally around this whole siege mentality thing that they did last time. It's almost as if they're going back to the well too many times if they do that once more, if you know what I mean. And I think they might struggle to get that same mentality going and we'll be out, hopefully, ready to breathe fire after the way we played in that second half. And we can just blitz them, I think. They'll drop in belief and we can have a good night out.
Absolutely. Big response from the boys this week. There's been a lot of positives to come out of the season so far. A win gets us to 3-2 and then we can reset and go from there. Thanks, Garby. Appreciate your time on the match.
Thanks, mate.
This week at Safeway, shop the 10 for $10 produce sale. With the 10 for $10 produce sale, get items like large avocados, mangoes, green, red, orange, or yellow bell peppers, cucumbers, large lemons, or 16-ounce bags of Signature Farms baby peeled carrots for the member price of just $1 each. Plus, select meats like Signature Farms 80% lean ground beef and Signature Select extra meaty pork loin back ribs are buy one, get one free this week. Hurry in before these deals are gone. Visit Safeway.com for more deals.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to AuscastNetwork.com for details.